Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. One of you sent me a comment which said, when I was doing my essential list for beginners, I've done some pretty challenging ones, right? Some real head-banging music, some really exciting atonal stuff and modern stuff and primitivism and all of that stuff. So someone said, why don't you just give them a break and do 10 ballets? Well, as luck would have it, I had my 10 ballet list all ready to rock. So let's do it. Ballet music is wonderful. Now, ballets exist in two basic forms. There are classical ballets and other. The classical ballet is a big, long, usually multi-act, like 3 acts or something, sort of extravaganza, which we'll talk about in a moment. And the other kind is usually shorter and 1 act, maybe 2 scenes, not 2.5 hours long. And that's the kind of thing that's happened mostly after the 20th century when people's attention spans got shorter. But no, actually what happened is that ballet productions were a selection of different ballets rather than just one big gargantuan ballet. So we're going to have some samples of both. And what you should always know is that most ballets, even the shorter ones, often pop up in suites, in suite form, and those suites are perfectly legitimate, and you can take your ballet complete or you can take it in a suite. Often the suites contain most of the good bits, and they leave out the parts where what they call the pantomime parts, which is theoretically how the plot moves along in the ballet when people actually do things rather than dance, because you know how ballet works, right? There's a story, believe it or not, and this story has to somehow be enacted without words, unlike an opera or song or something. So they stand around, in their thing, and they do this. And this is supposed to say, well, I went to the post office this morning and the package hadn't arrived and I was terribly upset and I had a fight with my husband, and that's the plot. And then once you get the plot bit over, they dance about it. Oh, I went to the post office, I did all of this, and I was so frustrated that now I have to dance. I do my dance of anxiety. That's the way ballets operate. And so the pantomime music stuff sometimes is terribly uninteresting. In modern ballet, sometimes it's more interesting than the actual dances. And so composers make suites, which consist mostly of just the dance parts, which is what everyone wants to listen to. And so you can take your ballet however you want to take it. But let's get to the list. Number 1. You ready? Delibes, Coppelia. Now, Leo Delibes was his name. He was a wonderful composer. He also wrote Lakme. Lakme. Lakme is the British Airways commercial with the 2 sopranos. Yeah, da da da, da 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 da, yeah, da 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 da, but about 3 octaves higher. Yeah, that's Delibes. First-rate composer. Tchaikovsky was dazzled by Delibes, and he wrote 2 big full-length ballets, Coppelia and Sylvia. Coppelia is about, a doll who comes to life and, does things and dances a lot, but the music is wonderful, absolutely wonderful. French classical ballet actually sort of got started. Ballet is kind of French. It has that long history of dance from the Baroque period where Romeo and those people wrote opera ballets. They were songs and dances all mixed together. Anyway, the original French big classical ballet is by Adolphe Adam. It's called Giselle, which is not on my list, but I just mentioned it, so I guess it might as well have been, right? And that's also something that you can dip into if you want. But I like starting with Coppelia because it's just such a beautiful, gorgeous, romantic score. And, if you want to get into Giselle, go for it. Anyway, next on the list is down below as usual. Tchaikovsky, the ultimate ballet guy in the 19th century anyway. Now, he wrote 3. He wrote Swan Lake, he wrote Sleeping Beauty, and he wrote The Nutcracker. Now, his acknowledged ballet masterpiece is actually Sleeping Beauty, which is a huge, long, very virtuosic piece and lasts a good 2.5 hours most of the time. But I put Swan Lake on the list because it's just the most popular, and it has the tune. The tune. Ya da 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 bum ba da 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 da. And it's the one you see in every TV show that has a ballet. They're always doing Swan Lake. You know, there's the Black Swan, the evil Black Swan, and there's a guy named Siegfried, and there's magic spells, and they go running around shooting arrows at swan things, and then you have like the pas de deux, and not the pas de deux, the pas de whatever, the whole thing there, when all of the identically dressed ladies come out, you know, all dressed like swans, and they do their thing, and you've got the Dance of the Baby Swans, which is one of my miniature masterpieces. It's an incredible piece of music. You know, one of the things that always drove me crazy about those big corps de ballet things is that they never look quite identical. You know, they're supposed to be absolutely identical and 100% mechanically in sync. You know, they all go up and down and up and down and up and down and sideways. They twiddle their little toes, and they're all up like this on their tippy toes. And there's always something slightly out of sync with it. It always drives me crazy watching classical ballet because I want absolute mechanical precision with no deviation whatsoever. And of course, that's impossible. They're only human beings after all. So I sort of just listen to the music where those corps de ballet operations take place. So that's that one. And then we have Prokofiev, Romeo and Juliet. Yeah. Gorgeous. Yeah, I mean, everybody loves Romeo and Juliet. You got the balcony scene. You have that fabulous dance of the knights at the ball. Bum, ba-dum, 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 bum. It was both a perfume commercial, Ego East, you know, the women with the doors going out, going, Ego East, as the music's in the background. And it was also a car ad, like for Lexus or something, where you had these giant ball bearings with the car sort of driving amongst them, and you were waiting to see if it was going to get crushed and obliterated, which of course it didn't, because it was a Lexus or whatever it was. And the music was going, dum, ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. Oh, Romeo and Juliet's fantastic. And like most big classical ballets, I mean, this one's in 4 acts, and it is terribly repetitious. You may be better off with the suites because there are 3 of them and they have all the good bits. And so, you know, but if you really love the good bits and you want to hear many of them more than once, then you can listen to the complete ballet. Next, Glazunov, The Seasons. Now, this is a 1-act ballet in 4 parts because you have 4 seasons, right? And it's got great tunes. It is only 40 minutes long, and I do not understand why The Seasons is not performed regularly as a second half piece in place of like just another symphony. It is glorious, romantic Russian music full of fantastic tunes, and it's exactly like 45 minutes. I mean, it's symphony length. It's amazing. It really ought to be performed as a concert work regularly. God knows it's not danced all that often either. So, you know, it's like a symphonic poem, just a big symphonic poem on the seasons. Treat it that way, for heaven's sake, and play it. Audiences would go crazy. It's so much fun. And then let's say Stravinsky. Now, Stravinsky is really the great ballet guy of the 20th century. That was his medium. He wrote more ballet music than just about anybody, and ballet music that became really popular. And I only have one on the list. It's Petrushka. Petrushka, about the puppet that comes to life and meets a very bad end. I mean, it's one of the greatest ballets ever. It's full of Russian folk tunes, but Stravinskified, performed in a very Stravinsky-like way. And of course, the end is very creepy because Petrushka gets beheaded and killed or whatever, and then his ghost comes back to haunt the puppeteer who, you know, enacted this whole story. It's really an amazing piece of music, and it's one of the great stagings of any ballet. The idea of, you know, it's framed by 2 big tableaux, the Shrovetide Fair, where you have people running around doing fair things. Then you have these puppets. And the 2 interior tableaux, because it has 4 tableaux or scenes, involve the puppets as characters themselves in their little puppet theater backstage, what's going on with the puppets. And it's really, really cool. and it's about half an hour. So, it's always played complete nowadays. There is a suite, actually, which, you can probably find. Eugene Ormandy recorded it quite nicely. There are a couple performances of it, but 99% of the performances of Petrushka are the complete ballet, including the spooky and, to my mind, somewhat unsatisfying ending, which works marvelously on stage, but separately is kind of indeterminate because, of course, he's a spooky ghost who's haunting his puppeteer after all this big, colorful, fun music. The suite ends with a bang, and so it's probably more satisfying for concert audiences, or at least me. So, as a concert audience person. Anyway, it's a work of absolute genius. But after the three initial ballets, which were the Firebird, Petrushka, and the Rite of Spring, which is on our list of primitivism, Stravinsky turned to neoclassicism. And, well, there was one more sort of primitivist work, Les Noces, The Wedding, which is extraordinary. It's a choral ballet with voices. But then he started doing Pulcinella and Apollo and Orpheus and all of these dance pieces based on classical Greek themes and in a completely different style. And they're all extraordinary in their way. They really are. They're marvelous works. So Stravinsky is like a big guy in the ballet world, and you will encounter him often if you really enjoy his dance music. Next, Ravel, Daphnis et Chloé. Oh, Ravel called it a choreographic symphony because it's based on recurring motifs. Those motifs are ya da 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 da, ya da 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 da. That's one, and the other is da da dum bum bum ba da 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 da. I mean, and he takes those and he weaves them into a whole wonderful story about Daphnis loves Chloé. They make fun of Dorcas. She gets kidnapped by pirates. The god Pan appears and scares away the pirates. And then for the last 20 minutes, there's a sunrise, which is one of the most beautiful things in all of music, and an orgy. There are two suites. The second suite is the most popular. It contains the sunrise and the orgy. The first suite has, the scene in the pirates' camp and all of that stuff. But all of it leaves out like the beginning of the ballet, which is beautiful. It also begins with daybreak and sunrise. You get two of them. It's two for the price of one. It's about an hour long, and it is performed quite often separately, except that there's always an issue because you have an off-stage wordless chorus that's always moaning and groaning throughout the whole thing. And at one point, they have an interlude all to themselves, which is a little bit of an issue if you don't have the chorus. But it is an absolutely wonderful piece. Wonderful, wonderful piece. Ravel's ballet masterpiece. And next, oh yes, Manuel de Falla. Oh, this is so great. The three-cornered hat. El sombrero de tres picos. Oh my God, it's just the apotheosis of Spanish dance music. And again, there are a couple of suites containing the big dances. It does take a few minutes to get going. It has a chorus that has castanets and it's going cha 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 cha, hey hey hey, click 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 click, da 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 da, like that. But once you get past the opening, it just rocks. It's one gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous piece of music after the next. And it's a typical. The story is very well known. It's the miller's wife and the mayor, basically. He wants to fool around with her and they trick him, and it's that's the story. I mean, ballet plots are not really all that significant because there's only so much you can do if you're only jumping up and down and dancing or pantomiming, whatever you had for breakfast. So the three-cornered hat is really, really glorious. I mean, just another 40 minutes long, play the whole thing. It's a symphonic piece. It has, recurring themes. It holds together beautifully. You just need a chorus to click their castanets and shout, which actually the orchestra can do, the part of the orchestra that doesn't play the opening. And you need a soprano who sings just like 2 seconds of music in a couple of spots. And that's it. It's phenomenal. Then we have Poulenc. See, most of these guys are French, or they were Spanish people working in France, or they did things in France. Everybody had to go to France if you're doing ballets, because that's where they all were. Stravinsky was in France. and Delibes was French, and Glazunov and the Russian ballet school was French. I mean, it was based on the French aesthetic and style. So Poulenc, les Biches, that means the bitches. I mean, but it's not the bitches in like a bad sense. It's young nubile girls doing young nubile girl things. I have no clue what they do in this ballet. It's also a ballet with songs. It has a chorus that sings a few numbers, and it has a wonderful suite, and it is so tuneful and just delightful. Oh my goodness. It goes ba-da-dum ba-ba-ba-bum ba-dum ba-da-da-da-dum ba-da-dum ba-ba-ba-bum da-dum ba-da-da-dum bum 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 ba-bum ba-ba-ba-bum. Oh God, it's fantastic. And if you have it as the suite, I mean, you know what? It makes a great ringtone. I have like 3 bits of it as ringtones. They're just fabulous, fabulous ringtones. Your phone will go off and everyone's just going to turn around and say, gee, that's great. What's that? It's so cool. So Poulenc's Les Biches, it was his first big orchestral work, and it's marvelous. And it's also one of those one-act, 40-minute long, why not perform it? Because they don't. That's why. And as a beginner, if enough beginners begin to love this stuff, maybe concert promoters will take notice of all of the beginners who want to hear these pieces in concert and start playing them. We're staying in France. Roussel, Bacchus et Ariane, Bacchus and Ariadne. Oh, this is gorgeous. It's sort of a neoclassical, quasi-modernist ballet. It's spiky and rhythmic and exciting. It's a little bit in the Stravinsky tradition, but Roussel was his own guy. And Bacchus and Ariadne consists of 2 suites numbers 1 and 2. Suite number 2 is quite popular. The 2 of them together comprise the entire ballet, basically. So you can just get the whole thing, which will still be divided probably into suites 1 and 2 or parts 1 and 2, and just listen to the whole thing. It's got such great rhythm. I mean, that was Roussel's thing. It's exciting and bracing. It's like a ceviche, luscious seafood with citrus juice, a tangy. It's bracing and refreshing music all the way. First bit is first note to last, and it too ends with an orgy, because you have to end ballets with orgies. I mean, they're always better with the orgy, and in this particular case, Ariadne is crowned with a diadem of stars at the end, and it has one of the most glorious apotheoses and big ballsy endings that you're ever going to hear. It's like crash, boom, boom, crash, crash, boom, crash. It's phenomenal. You're going to love Bacchus and Ariane. And he wrote 3 very fascinating ballets. His last one was called Aeneas. It's a ballet with songs. And then the first one is really cool. It's called The Spider's Feast. It's all about insects. The spider's lair, munching away on all of the other bugs. And it's half an hour long, and the music is amazing. But Bacchus and Ariadne is his big, super-duper masterpiece, and the second suite is his most popular orchestral work of all of them. But you might as well get the whole ballet. It's all wonderful. It really is. Finally, last but not least, Copland, Appalachian Spring. I mean, how can you talk about ballets without talking about Appalachian Spring? Now, Appalachian Spring exists in multiple versions. There is the original version, which was only for like 12 instruments for a chamber ensemble, and it's about 35 minutes long. From that, Copland orchestrated the whole thing, and from that, he extracted about a 20-minute long suite. The suite to Appalachian Spring. And of course, it has the tune Simple Gifts in it, which became extracted as variations on a shaker tune, a little 5-minute sniglet taken from Appalachian Spring. But of course, Copland studied in France, where Nadia Boulanger was his teacher. Her idol was Stravinsky. So Copland comes out of that school. And in addition to his populist ballets, which were Rodeo, Billy the Kid, and Appalachian Spring, he also wrote several more abstract works, dance panels, and some other things like that. He was another fantastic ballet composer, rather like Stravinsky was. And I think Appalachian Spring is a wonderful place to end this series of 10 fabulous, incredibly enjoyable ballets. You're going to love them all. I guarantee it. And they're much easier to listen to, I think, than some of the more challenging lists that I've presented recently. So you can decide whether you want to relax and enjoy the buoyant dance rhythms, or whether you want to challenge yourself a little bit more and get into the crazier stuff, or any of these other lists. I mean, there's like 15 or 20 of them now, and there will be more. We're going to cover the whole universe of music, one way or another, so that you folks who are starting out have where to start. That's my goal. You're going to have a comprehensive course in beginnerdom, and I really hope that you enjoy these. I'm having such a good time putting them together for you. Keep on listening, and thank you so much for joining me. Take care.